I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right, let's go. Happy Thursday, guys. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesday, Thursday, and Fridays. And you can catch me here Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. And let's get to it, guys. We have a packed show tonight. The railroad workers will be here, I believe, at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I'm excited to hear from them. But we have a lot to talk about. We are going to do call in tonight as well. I really want to get your take on this whole debate issue. And I think it'll be good to do it too, because like I said, you'll get a chance to hear from the railroad workers tonight as well. So you can put both of those together, and tell me how you feel. Tell me how you feel. I want to give a quick shout out to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabby, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen on the ticker there. I also want to give a shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's go ahead and give it up for Nicole Vance and Noel. Noel. And Gail Gametta. Thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate your support there. Want to give quick shout outs to people in the chat, then we'll get into the thumbnail and we'll start doing the damn thing. So let's go ahead and do it. I see several comments. Shout out to Steve, says smash the like. What's going on, Negro, says lock him up, lock him up. Shout out to Hannah G, says Sabby with a smile. Greetings, Mastermind Hour. Grim Trolls Unite. Oh boy. Oh, I can't wait till we get to that story. Shout out to Lewis. Railroad workers should engage in a nonviolent strike and force Biden to use the military to break up their nonviolent action. Dabby Dabs, how's it going, fam? Don't forget to give the like button some love. Shout out to Samuel. Brie and Kshama gave Ryan a grim job. Oh, man, that debate is something else. Shout out to Soul, says, hello again, Sabby. Greetings, Lawrence, who is a Sabby member, says Doobie Doobie Door 2024. Shout out to Chris, says, woo. Greetings, Desert Mantis. It has been an extremely grim day for this cowboy. What's going on, Israel? Hi, my beautiful doves. Happy Thirsty Thursday. That's right. It is Thirsty Thursday. What's going on, Bad Cookie said, I just finished the last hour of that interview. If Brie hasn't lost even a single moniker of respect for Ryan Grimm, I don't know what will. Shout out to Kano. Hey, Sabrina, round 2. That's right. It is time for round 2. Greetings, Angela, who's a Sabby member. Looking forward to this. Should be a fire show. Hello, awesome people. What's going on, Gamer says hello again, y'all. Shout out to, whoops, I skipped. Welch's Grapes. It's about to be a banger. That's right. What's going on, Myra's Mama says hello, loves. Shout out to, I just skipped another one. Shout out to Notori says hello, everyone. Greetings, Delthea, who's a Sabby member, says, hello, hello, all you beautiful people. Greetings, Kathy is giving shout outs there to Gamer. What's going on, Snooze says, good evening. Greetings, Mika says, Sabby Sabs, hi and fire. What's going on, Mika? Shout out to Jay says, hello, Dabby, Desert, Bad Cookie, Soul, and all citizens of the universe. I just pictured He-Man there for a second. He-Man, I have the power of the universe. Shout out to where he says, hey, everybody. What's going on? The Oracle at Delphi says, hey, lady. Hey, Oracle. Greetings, Casey. Send solidarity and fire. Let's go ahead and get into it. I do want to make sure I cover this first story here before the workers show up. And greetings, Jonathan says, hey, Sabby, keep up the awesome work. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. What are we discussing tonight? We have some interesting stories. I actually had more stories and I was like, I had to scale it back. I'll cover those tomorrow because there's been a lot that's happened in the past 2 days. Tonight, we are discussing Brianna Joy Gray, Kshama Sawant, and Ryan Grimm debate. It has not been a good day debate-wise for Ryan Grimm. Ouch. I don't even know how else to say it. We're going to get into that later on as well. I'm also going to discuss Trump Organization guilty. Yes, that news came through. We're going to dive into that story. I'm also going to discuss Boston poverty fix. What is happening in the Boston area and how are they trying to address poverty or fix poverty, actually? And last but not least, of course, the Railroad Workers United will be here. They're coming up around 8:30, so I'll be excited to talk to them as well. You'll finally get a chance to hear from them on this show. So it just happened to work out that that debate between Kshama and Brie and Ryan Grimm happened right before the railroad workers were coming on this show. So I'm going to talk to them, hear what they say, hear how we can help them. And then we're going to go into that debate discussion as well. And we're going to make some comparisons there. And I just happened to work out that way. I did not plan it that way. So I'm excited for that. But let's go ahead and get into this first story because if you have not heard, yes, Donald Trump's Trump Organization has been found guilty of tax fraud. This was not a surprise to me and probably not to many of you that are watching, but now it is officially confirmed. I want to start off with a video clip here, and then I'm going to go into a little bit of information about the Trump Organization, and I'm going to show you how this is not the first time that they have been in trouble. This is not the first time that they have had violations. Let's go ahead and get into that.
A New York jury has found former President Donald Trump's organization guilty on 17 counts of tax fraud and other financial crimes. Prosecutors say for 15 years, executives of the family business leaned on the Trump organization to evade income taxes on rent, private school tuition, and luxury cars. All of this happening as several other investigations continue to loom over the former president.
I want to go back here for just a second because she didn't mention all of the items on this list. So I do want to make sure we go through these. So the Trump Organization has been found guilty of a scheme to defraud in the first degree, conspiracy in the fourth degree, criminal tax fraud in the third degree, criminal tax fraud in the fourth degree, and falsifying business records in the first degree. Long story short, guilty. That's a lot. That's a lot there. Let's go on.
Guilty on 17 counts of tax fraud and other financial crimes. Prosecutors say for 15 years, executives of the family business leaned on the Trump organization to evade income taxes on rent, private school tuition, and luxury cars. All of this happening as several other investigations continue to loom over the former president. For more, let's bring in ABC News investigative reporter Aaron Katursky, along with Kimberly Whaley, ABC News legal contributor and law professor at American University. So, Aaron, let's just talk about the key evidence that was actually found against Trump's organization here that led to the guilty verdict.
It was a lot of accounting minutia, Kira. Not easy for the jury to sift through general ledgers and W-2s. But in the end, it was really the criminal conduct of Alan Weisselberg, the former chief financial officer, and other top Trump organization executives who had, in Weisselberg's case, pleaded guilty to committing tax fraud. And the prosecutors successfully convinced the jury that the company was liable for the criminal conduct of its top executives.
So I just want to add this piece here because this is important for people to understand. This is not like a court found them guilty and they said they were not guilty. They pleaded guilty. So there's no, for people who are trying to find some type of, I don't know, escape clause here, that is not happening. No, like they're guilty, period. Let's go on.
So, Kimberly, Trump Organization attorneys swiftly responded, of course, to the guilty verdict, saying that they would appeal. Is there any merit to their defense here?
Well, they will comb through the record and they will file an appeal. It's an appeal as of right. Every loser in a case like this gets the opportunity. And I think one of the big issues, as Aaron indicated, are three words in the statute: in behalf of. Was there sufficient evidence that what Weisselberg and others did was actually in behalf of the Trump Organization? And
I wouldn't even go that far. This is how I'm going to look at this, and this is how I want to explain this to people. As the defense, it is your job, like any, I would say, good defense lawyer is going to try to appeal if they have the opportunity to do so. Just because they are filing for an appeal does not mean that they are innocent. So let's just be clear here. As the defense attorney, if you have the option to file for an appeal, 9 times out of 10, you are going to try to do that. That's just a part of their job as a lawyer here. But one of the things it mentions here, this case was unprecedented and legally incorrect. We will appeal this verdict. I find that hard to believe as well. I don't think it was legally incorrect. They have been pursuing this for years. I remember them talking about this back in 2019. So it's been a couple of years. I'm pretty sure they had their ducks in a row in reference to the documents that they needed. You mentioned, or he mentioned earlier, that they sorted through numerous W-2s. I'm pretty sure they have what they needed to go so far as to what they did. And again, this has been years in the making. This did not come up overnight. So you're talking about a lot of paperwork, a lot of hours, probably a couple of shots of vodka here and there, late nights, maybe some early mornings, but they've been working on this for a long time. So I don't want you to think that they are necessarily innocent. In fact, based on what I've seen, they are not.
Not for them personally. The judge and the lawyers kind of sort of jockeyed around those three words. And I think the argument will be that it was either, wrongly explained to the jury, or the jury misunderstood, or there wasn't enough evidence there. Appeals could last months, if not years. We won't know if they'll succeed on appeal, but they'll take their shot.
All right, let's pivot for a sec here. The January 6th committee, Aaron, indicating it may make criminal referrals to the Department of Justice if there is anything that leads you to believe that Trump would be on top of their list.
Well, sure. And we know the Justice Department is already investigating Trump and others for their roles on January 6th. They don't need a referral from members of Congress, although the members of Congress, especially the Democrats, may want the sort of drama of giving a criminal referral. But the investigation is well underway, and undoubtedly the new special counsel who's overseeing the investigation is well aware of what the January 6th committee has found.
Also, Aaron, we're learning that a federal appeals court heard arguments that Trump is not entitled to the immunity if he's seeking regarding his alleged involvement leading up to January 6th. So what can you tell us about that?
This is a lawsuit filed by 11 members of Congress, all Democrats, and 2 Capitol Police officers who accuse Trump of violating the Ku Klux Klan Act that ensures the safety of federal officials. And Trump had said that he is immune as civil litigation and said that his speech on the ellipse preceding the attack at the Capitol was part of his official duties. And the appellate judges really questioned his attorney on that today during oral argument. They wanted to know what work was he doing when he was telling people to fight like hell or they wouldn't have a country anymore. And of course, the attorney for the members of Congress said that Trump is not entitled to any immunity because he incited some of the violence.
Finally, Kimberly, what argument would Trump's team need to make in order to be granted immunity, or is that option not even on the table?
Well, absolute immunity, as Aaron indicates, all kinds of government actors, judges, to some degree, members of Congress, presidents, if they're doing their job, we don't want them sued all over the place for acting as president. So I think it's a stretch to say here, if you're engaged in potentially criminal activity, that's within the scope. And I always go back to Richard Nixon, right? He tried to keep his Watergate tapes made.
They always try to use, everybody always uses Richard Nixon as an example. You guys notice that? It always goes back to Richard Nixon.
In the Oval Office of the White House. A little bit different. It was an executive privilege claim. But in that case, unanimous Supreme Court said, no, grand jury gets it. The people have a right to know this stuff. Donald Trump was no more a king than Joe Biden, than any other United States president. I think sometimes he and his lawyers forget that basic truth.
Aaron, Kimberly, thank you.
Hi.
Okay, so that is the video clip there about the Trump organization. They brought in the January 6th element to that as well. But I want to tell you a little bit about the organization because some people have asked, they've already reached out and like, what is this organization? So I want to tell you a little bit about that so you can understand what this is really about. And also the fact that this is not the first time where they have been in hot water. So let's go ahead and pull that up here. Try to make this as big for you as possible. So what exactly is the Trump Organization? The Trump Organization is a group of about 500 business entities, of which Donald Trump is the sole or principal owner. Around 250 of these entities use the Trump name. The organization was founded in 1927 by Donald Trump's paternal grandmother, Elizabeth Christ Trump, and his father, Fred Trump, as E. Trump and Son. Donald Trump began leading it in 1971, renamed it around 1973, and handed it off leadership to his children in 2016 when he won the 2016 U.S. presidential election. So that's another question some people have brought up too. Would his children be implicated here as well? We'll have to wait and see. The Trump Organization, through its various constituent companies and partnerships, has had interest in real estate development, investing, brokerage sales, and marketing and property management. Trump Organization entities own, operate, invest in, and develop residential real estate, hotels, resorts, residential towers, and golf courses in various countries. So this is a huge organization, you guys. This is huge. They also operate or have operated in construction, hospitality, casinos, entertainment, book and media publishing, broadcast media, model management, retail, financial services, food and beverages, business education, online travel, commercial and private aviation, and beauty pageants. So some people, I don't know if everyone remembers this, but I remember Trump used to also host beauty pageants as well. So that's also a part of this. Now, I want to get to the piece here, which I think is really important. Since the financial statements of Trump's organization's holdings and Donald Trump's personal tax returns are both private, its true value, it's not publicly known, though a wide range of estimates have been made. Trump has publicly released little definite financial documentation to confirm his valuation claims. On several occasions, Trump has been accused of deliberately inflating the valuation of Trump Organization properties through aggressive lobbying of the media to bolster his perceived net worth. Now let's scroll down here because there's a piece here where I want to show you where they have had issues before. Make sure I go to the right part here. And this starts under leadership under Donald Trump. So Donald Trump worked for his father's business while attending the University of Pennsylvania. And in 1968, he officially joined the company. In the early 1970s, Fred became chairman of the board, while Donald was made president of the company. Around 1973, he began referring to the business as the Trump Organization. The business had previously been referred to on occasion as Fred C. Trump Organization. The Fred Trump Organization or the Trump Organization, but had not a single formal name. Now, here we go. I told you this is not the first time they've been in hot water. There was a civil rights suit in 1973. I wish I could make this bigger for, okay, yeah, that's a little bit better font wise. In 1973, the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division filed a civil rights suit against the Trump Organization, charging them for violating the 1968 Fair Housing Act by refusing to rent to Black people. Now, some of you may have heard of this before. This is one of the things that was brought up when he was running for president in 2016, right? But this is actually true. Now, I've seen this before on Trump documentaries. I've researched this. This was an issue where they did not want to rent to Black people. Donald Trump has denied this multiple times, but the evidence is there. It goes on to say the National Urban League had sent Black and white testers to apply for apartments in Trump-owned complexes. The white testers got the apartments, whereas the Black testers did not. According to court records, 4 superintendents or rental agents reported that applications sent to the central office for acceptance or rejection were coded by race. A 1979 Village Voice article quoted a rental agent who said Fred Trump had instructed him not to rent to Black people and to encourage existing Black tenants to leave. Now, I want to jump in and say this is just not something that happened in the 70s. This still happens in New York City today. When I lived in New York City, I went through this same thing where there were some landlords that would not rent to Black people. It is a common problem, and they have ways of getting around it. And it's not like they come out directly and say to you, I'm not going to rent to you because you're Black. They just reject your application. And so what some of these companies will do, and some of these different organizations will do, is they'll do these test runs where they'll send in people of different races. They may have the same income, same credit score, to apply for apartments to see if there's any differential treatment. So that is what they did here. But again, this is not something that just happened in the 70s. This continues to happen today. Now, it goes on to say, in 1975, a consent decree described by the head of the DOJ's housing division as one of the most far-reaching ever negotiated required Trump to advertise vacancies in minority papers and list vacancies with the Urban League. The Justice Department subsequently stated that continuing racially discriminating conduct by Trump agents has occurred with such frequency that it has created a substantial impediment to the full enjoyment of equal opportunity. And there's a lot more that it goes into here about the different developments. And so it seems like, based on what I have gathered, it seems like the financial troubles seem to start when Trump took over that organization. Seems like his dad seemed to be a little bit more organized. Like, I don't know, but that's when it seems like a lot of the issues had started there. But long story short, yes, they are in trouble. Yes, they have been found guilty. This is not something that I think they can really refute, so to speak. Like I said, they've been trying to bring this case about for years. I know they didn't want to bring him to trial while he was still president. I don't even think you can at that point in time while he's in office. But once he was removed from office, that continued. And that was part of the plan, was to take down the Trump Organization and to prove that there was tax fraud there. But here's the thing I want you to take away with this. This is not a Donald Trump issue. This issue can happen with anybody who has as much money as he does. I don't believe he's the only one. I don't believe he is alone. I believe there are other millionaires and billionaires who are also guilty of tax fraud. They find ways to dodge taxes. They have these tax loopholes. They have ways of sending money overseas. They have these offshore accounts. So I think the way that some people have been discussing this, yeah, get him. We got him. We finally got him. Okay, you got one. What about all the others who are still getting by with cheating the system? That's something I want you to think about. Israel says, Sabby Sabs, the man who filed for bankruptcy 286 times. Who's shocked? Nobody. Rich guy doing rich guy things. JB says, criminal's gonna criminal. What's crazy is his billionaire friends probably do a lot of similar things, but they didn't get caught. Exactly. Exactly. Rick, can't all capitalists be charged with tax fraud? Oh, Rick. if only. Jessica says, our entire government are criminals. They are all going to start arresting each other as a political fight. We shall see. We shall see. But like I said, I don't know. They'd have to look into other people too for me. They'd have to look. I'm curious about Elon Musk too. And I'm curious about Jeff Bezos. But I'm going to here to tell you, Trump is not alone. He is not alone. Okay, Corey, let me know if there's anything on Rockfin. If not, I'll go ahead and bring in Mary Lee and Matt Parker. Okay, thank you. Now I'll bring in a banner for them because I do want to have a banner for Railroad United. Awesome. Okay, Matt and Mary Lee, if you're ready, I can go ahead and bring you in. Just give me a thumbs up if you're good to go. Yep. All right. Let's bring in Matt. Bring in Mary Lee. Hello and welcome.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hi, Matt. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. All right, guys, my special guests tonight are Matt Parker and Mary Lee Taylor. They are coming on to discuss Railroad Workers United and this strike that, well, what we were thinking would happen, this issue that has happened with the railroad workers in the United States. I want to thank both of you so much for coming on, and I want to give you a chance to tell everyone a little bit more about yourself. So we'll go ahead and start with Matt.
Hi, Sabrina. My name is Matt Parker. I live in Northern Nevada. I have worked for the railroad for 19 years now, both as a brakeman conductor and now as a locomotive engineer.
Awesome. Mary Lee?
My name's Mary Lee Taylor. I recently retired after working on the railroad for 34 years, 33 of which about was as a locomotive engineer, hauling freight from one city to another. First in the southern part of this country, and currently I was at the BNSF out of Chicago, and I live right by Chicago.
Awesome. So I'm pretty sure both of you are aware to what has been going on with railroad workers. Recently, there were issues with the contract and trying to reach an agreement there. I want to get your take on this in reference to especially the sick leave, because this was new to me and I was really surprised when I first heard about this. I believe it was about a month ago, the first time I talked about it. I was surprised that railroad workers in this country were not basically guaranteed sick leave. And I want to hear from both of you. What do you feel, or how do you feel about the requests that were being made by the workers? And how do you feel about just not being guaranteed sick leave in this country? And I'll go back up to Matt.
We did a show the other day, and Mary Lee kind of let it off very good, talking about how there was a point in time on the railroad, she had said, where if you even brought up sick leave, or excuse me, if you even brought up attendance policies, you'd be laughed out the door. And this is kind of what's at the crux of the issue right now is these draconian attendance policies that the railroads have added that leave us almost no opportunity to take any time off for family time, for sickness, for anything. When I hired out with the railroad, unless it was really excessive, the railroads didn't care if you took time off. It was not the issue that it is now. What's happened here is, particularly within the last 4 to 5 years, with the implementation of this sham business model that the railroads are using now, that they call it nothing to do at all with either vision or scheduling. It's all about extracting as profit as they can to return to the shareholders. They've cut the workforces down now to where they don't have enough people remaining to handle the current demand of freight. And so their response to that has been to try to clamp down the screws and make it so that we can't take any time off without facing the threat of discipline, up to and including being dismissed. And it's just created an untenable situation now for these. It's disenfranchised the workforce. It's created a lot of dissent, and that's really what's at the core of the issue here.
Yeah, Mary Lee, I'm curious here. I'm really trying to understand like how workers can go this long, like so many years, and not being able to have sick leave, particularly during the pandemic. Knowing we just had a pandemic in this country, I couldn't imagine not being able to take that time off. Some of the people that have been sick during the pandemic, they've been out for like a week. And so I can't imagine. One of the things that has been brought up, and hopefully both of you or one of you can clear this up for people tonight. One of the things that has been brought up, if I'm going to play this clip as well, some of the workers have said that they did want paid sick leave, and that the union leaders were not doing what they asked for. They went against what the workers wanted. I do know that this can happen sometimes in unions, but I think where people are a little bit confused, it just seems like, why would the union leaders go against that? Like the paid sick leave, like I feel like this has been a big mess politically, leaving this up to Congress or the Senate or Joe Biden, as you put it as well, to determine the contract. And those of us who are very much like involved in politics, or we are very critical of the political system in our country, we're looking at this from afar and we're saying there is no way the Senate is going to pass the paid sick leave. What do you think may have happened there?
Well, I really can't speak to that directly because I operate within one union. Of course, I talk with coworkers and other workers who are in the different rail unions. But I can't speak to the ins and outs of it. You don't have enough time in the day for us to even begin to discuss how we arrived at this point. But I will say that the fact that we're even talking about this today in terms of sick leave and paid sick time shows how important it is for us to explain to the American public in its entirety the kinds of conditions that we work under, the draconian attendance policies that are forcing illness upon us, forcing us to work sick, forcing us to work tired, when we can't even get unpaid leave. We can't even take off without getting paid. So that's the real question. Time away from the railroad, the time that we deserve and need in order to live our lives and to recharge physically, mentally, and every other way. So I'm glad it has come before the public, because that's how ultimately we're going to win this. It's not going to be by either political party. It's going to be by us mobilizing ourselves and our allies, of which we have tens of millions right today. We haven't attempted to mobilize them, but we see through all kinds of other independent activities that people are organizing in towns and cities across the country, from the East Coast to the West Coast. And we're beginning to even build the webs, the networks that we can really do better, because our natural allies, excuse me, my cat's sick, Our natural allies are environmentalists. They're the shippers who are getting screwed by the railroads. They're every single worker in this country, and anyone who's fighting for human rights, really, for working people.
And Sabrina,
I hear you.
If I can add to that, there was a real simple fix to this part of the issue, and that was when President Biden appointed the Presidential Emergency Board to hear arguments from both sides. When we reached the point where we were at self-help back in September, one of the requests from the unions was that these attendance policies be thrown out, and that any future attendance policies with the railroads be required to be collectively bargained. That's not an unreasonable request, and that could have fixed a lot of it. Somewhere that fell off the face of the earth, and it morphed into this deal that the last minute deal that was made with the administration to provide three occurrences that railroaders could have without being disciplined in a year, that had to be scheduled at least 30 days in advance. And could only take place on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. That's absolutely absurd. And then it came down to this 7 paid days of sick time that was under consideration in Congress. The simple fix would have been to say, okay, from now on, we're going to collectively bargain this. But like I said, somewhere that fell off the face of the earth. And now this whole situation has just become part of the general discontent of the entire workforce, as we've seen the systemic destruction of our workplaces over the last several years through this business model that I made reference to before.
That's right. That's right. I have a question for both of you. Do both of you have children? Because I'm trying to figure out, like, with no paid sick leave, and this is something like some of my coworkers have gone through before as well. I don't have kids, but they brought this to my attention, is that they would actually save up their sick days just in case one of their kids got sick, because then they would have to stay home and take care of their child. And I never thought about that because I don't have kids. But I'm wondering, like, do either of you have kids, and how would you deal with that if you're not getting like paid sick leave? If you took that time off, then you're just not getting paid.
Well, first, if you are a single parent, what are you going to do? You can't, you don't have any, I mean, it happens and you have to be off. We don't have any provisions even for an emergency to be able to get off like that. We don't have the right, we have no right to any time off out for the railroad I came off of outside of 24 hours in 30 days. So as a single parent, your life wouldn't work too well doing that. As just a parent, especially, we're at all different pay scales, as it were, dependent on the craft. And if a person normally would work a 48-hour week, we work many more hours usually in freight service, then taking a day off could be absolutely the difference between eating and paying the light bill. So the actual money, the income that workers need, should be paid, especially as we're talking about rail workers. We, in our overwhelming majority, work in conditions that affect our health in a negative way. Many of us have sleep issues because we do not work on any kind of regular schedule. The majority of us. We're on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, regardless of what the weather is, if it's 20 below or it's 110. We work under these conditions with a ruined circadian rhythm. And the railroad should not only be furnishing us health care without us paying part of that premium, but they should also be giving us the paid time off that we need as we become ill. It's just utterly reasonable, I think, to anyone who lives and works in this country.
Sabrina, my child is grown, an adult, still lives with me right now. But back in late September of 2021, I got COVID, and I was required to quarantine, and I was off work for 10 days without pay. It spread to the rest of the house, and my wife ultimately did not make it. She passed away from complications of COVID. She was hospitalized for 25 days, and during that time, I still had to go to work. I still had to get on trains and take them across the state, and we work under regulations that require us now. We cannot have our cell phones on when we're on the train. This is a result of an accident many years ago in which a number of people were killed on a commuter train. So I'm getting on a train and going across the state. And I don't know when I get to the other end of the line if I'm going to have a message from the hospital that her health has worsened or perhaps she's passed away. This was my life for 25 days. And when she did finally pass away, it was by the grace of God, not by the grace of the railroad, that I just happened to be home holding her hand. This is the situation that we have to deal with as railroaders. These are the conditions that we have to work under. And the employees are just fed up.
Totally understand. Well, first and foremost, Matt, sorry for your loss. And this is just this is mind-boggling to me, because I'm thinking back, and we had a labor movement in this country at some point or another. Before I was born, we had a labor movement in this country, and yet, it wasn't until the pandemic where I think more people started to hear about some of these worker issues. But I think for people who have worked some of these jobs where they're not guaranteed sick pay, or they don't have any health insurance, or they're not guaranteed any type of paid family leave, those people, a lot of the waitress, the bartenders, like, they've been dealing with this for years. But it was really interesting to see that even once the pandemic started, and knowing the condition that the country was in at that time, that some of these employers were still not willing to even give their employees a little bit of breathing room, a pass, so to speak. It just goes to show you just how corrupt this country can be in reference to the workers, and how workers are heavily exploited. And it is really disgusting to me. I was talking to my dad about this the other day, about what's happening with the railroad workers, and it's mind-boggling. And I have to say this, and I say this to anyone who's listening. I grew up in a military family. The United States government, if you work for the military, you're guaranteed all of these things. You're guaranteed paid sick leave. You're guaranteed, actually, you take leave, it's like you can take like 30 days at a time. Like, you're guaranteed that. You're guaranteed healthcare. You're guaranteed paid maternity leave. And so it's frustrating to me, because I had those things growing up, and to see that, why doesn't everybody in this country have it? It's really upsetting, because I know that you can have it. And I want to play this clip for you here, because there was a railroad worker. Now, he went on to CNN, and he expressed his frustration to the commentator here. And I want you to hear what he had to say as well.
You voted for President Biden, but now you say you feel like he's turned his back on you. Why?
Well, what we've seen with this great rail strike of 22 that has ended very undramatically is we've seen unionized workers' right to bargain collectively get trampled on. Their voice has not been heard. They voted against a contract. We have a pro-labor president who loves to, pat himself on the back for that. And when the going got tough, he turned his back on the people he's supposed to be looking out for.
And when this bill that is now going to go to President Biden passed the House, it had a separate measure that actually had 7 paid sick days for you and your colleagues. That did not make it through the Senate. They voted against it. Are you asking President Biden not to sign this bill?
It's a good question. You don't go against what your members vote for. So shout out to Jamal Brown for getting that bill going and looking out for us. But the sick days was more of a distraction. The main attraction here is Joe Biden forced the contract on our unionized workers who voted against it.
So this piece right here, this is the piece some people have questions about, that Biden forced a contract on the union workers that did not want it. This is the piece I think some people are confused by, because what I've been hearing is that the union leaders were the ones that made the agreement, but he's saying that the workers did not want it. And I want to hear from both of you about that, your opinion about that.
Well, the vast majority of organized labor on the unions, of which there are 12 in our bargaining coalition, 55% voted these contracts down. None of the unions who voted it up did it by the margins, by great margins. For example, the union I was in, it was 53.5% for the contract. Almost half, a little over half, and almost half voted no. So there's a lot of sentiment against this contract either way. And democratically, we voted it down in our unions. And we have every right, as other people have said, we have every right to insist that any vote that we carry out in our unions, which we fought to get, that vote be respected. It means nothing to vote in a union. It means nothing to have a union. If what we can see in the future is direct government intervention, squarely on the side of the carriers, as it has historically every time it's intervened in any labor dispute, it has sided on the side of the employers. We're not looking for help in that manner from the government. We're looking to wage our own fight and the government to get out of the way. And I agree with the speaker on CNN that if Biden had been, in fact, a pro-labor president, he would have vetoed that bill because it was not good for labor, and labor voted and spoke, and he did it anyway.
Well said, Marilee. Matt, what's your take on this as well?
With regard to what Mr. Murtaugh said, I think you can count the administration's and Congress's actions in this as one of their biggest policy failures. We have seen for a number of years now railroad workers walking away from these careers in numbers that we've never seen before. The railroad industry used to be a place where people clamored to get in the door, and they stayed with it once they were in because it comes with a very good retirement benefit, and it was generally a good job. And now we've seen workers walking away from these jobs, and what potentially is going to happen as a result of this unpopular agreement being forced on us is that may accelerate. And if it does, with the workforce that's already stressed, if we lose even more workers in the coming days, which certainly could potentially happen, then the long-term effect of the result of these actions may not be as drastic as a strike, but it's going to be felt for a lot longer. It's going to take a lot longer to fix, and everybody's paying. The administration and Congress had a chance to take a situation. Again, the rail dispute here is just one symptom of this systematic destruction of the rail industry for several years, putting Wall Street above everything else. And the administration, Congress had an opportunity, a golden opportunity here to address that as well, by settling this dispute in a way that was favorable to the workers and could send a message to the management of these railroads that what they're comfortable, and they totally blew it. And so now again, we may see long term some very detrimental effects in this on the railroad industry. They took a situation and potentially made it much worse.
So just so I understand, because there's already been debates about this this week. Just so I understand, Marilee, you were saying that I think it was like 55% that voted it down.
Yes.
In that sense, when the union leaders went to make the agreement, they were going against what the workers wanted.
Well, I wasn't there. Are you talking about the final ones with Biden and Walsh and those people? I mean, I wasn't there. It was unclear. I thought there was a lot of non-transparency over what had gone back and forth. I will say that it was, I thought, clear, at least on one of the 7 Class 1 railroads, that anything that was less than a negotiated attendance policy that allowed us to actually take time off was not acceptable. We voted in January to strike over that exact issue, not all by itself, that standalone issue. We were enjoined by a federal judge, which usually happens, and we weren't able to get our story out as much as we should have been able to before other workers and before the public. So we started a little bit further behind than we would have been without the initial government intervention of that judge trying to decide that we could strike over this fundamental issue. So I just want to put that in context. And what how Matt put it is exactly right. There is not going to be what both the Biden administration and I think many of the mainstream pundits have to say about it, that somehow this is it. Well, okay, this is it. It's not it, because the central issue is not resolved. And I too, Matt, am embarrassed to even work on a railroad, having heard your experience about in terms of your illness and your wife's passing. I am deeply sorry for that. But it's not going to change, because they're going to keep doing it. The greed, the unconscionable greed of these railroads is destroying not only our lives, but the actual railroads themselves, as Matt so eloquently already spoke to. So the core issue is not going away. It's not fading. We will continue to get victimized as workers who take off any time for illness, fatigue, just mental health, whatever. They'll continue to get victimized by the railroads. They'll get terminated. The problems will be exacerbated. And the deep anger that exists amongst the ranks of labor working on the railroad will not fade away until the issues are addressed. That's what we have to, I think, really look at. That's the question. How are we going to come down in a big and broad way on the side of rail labor to keep this raised and to decisively win it in the short and long term, I'm speaking.
That's right. And one of the, go ahead, Bob, Matt.
Thank you. I can't really speak to the actions of our union leadership because I wasn't there. I don't know what took place, but what I can tell you is that we've gotten used to hearing from our leadership, having deals put before us and being told, well, you better accept this because this is the best that we're going to do. This goes back to the Railway Labor Act that we work under, and a lot of people don't understand because most of the unionized workforce works under the National Labor Relations Act. The difference between the two. The Railway Labor Act was written to prevent strikes. And back at the time that the rail carriers were largely economically deregulated to save them from bankruptcy in 1980, there were, by my count, 45 Class 1 railroads in this country. And Class 1 refers to the size of a rail carrier based on their gross revenue annually. Now we're down to 7, and that number is likely to drop to 6. As the Surface Transportation Board is poised to approve another merger. And what has happened here is these companies have gotten so big through mergers and acquisitions, they're nationalized now. There was a time where if there was a dispute between the unions and the railroads and you struck a carrier, it was not a big deal because there was other routes that freight could take. Now these carriers have gotten so big and there's so few of them now, and they bind together and bargain as a unit that they've used the Railway Labor Act to shield themselves from strikes. And so that act hamstrings us when it comes to seeking self-help. We can't strike, and therefore we become a victim of a game of politics. Who's in the White House? Who controls Congress? And are they likely to give us a good deal or not? And that depends on how far, that dictates how far we're going to push it on seeking a better contract. And as long as we have to play this game where Congress and the president are the final arbiters, we don't have the opportunity that other unions do to duke it out with the companies and try to get a better agreement. And I'm sure that's probably what this one came down to as well. How far are we going to get trying to push this, and can we get any better? And perhaps that had a role in to play in this tentative agreement that was put forth that ultimately was found to be highly unpopular with the majority of the union workforce. I think also too, though, you've got to go back and you've got to look at just the general discontent of workers completely in what they've seen in the destruction of their workplaces and wanting a better workplace. I think there's just this mentality among a lot of the workforce now that they want to fight. They're fed up and they want to fight. And unless you really hand them something good, they're more looking for the fight more than anything else. And when they get frustrated by having a bad deal like this shoved down their throat, this is what I was talking about in terms of now we potentially might see an acceleration of the number of people leaving.
Right. And that leads me into the question about a strike, because all of us watching here, like, we stand in solidarity with the workers. I've had Starbucks unionizers on the show, including some that were fired for trying to start a union. We've had, I'm trying to remember who else came up with Starbucks. There's been a lot of workers that have come on. Starbucks, Amazon, Kellogg's have come on. And I think, they have had these wins in trying to unionize or to try to fix things within the union that they've had. And one of the questions that has been coming up, and I've been wondering this as well, why didn't the railroad workers, why didn't they go on strike? And the reason why I ask is because, is it in reference to maybe not having enough like mutual aid funds like set up or put aside for them to go on strike? Or is it more so they were intimidated not to go on strike? And the reason why I ask is because I've seen a couple of interviews with railroad workers that said that they were prepared to go on strike, but that was a last resort. And my biggest fear when I first heard about this about a month ago, my biggest fear is when I found out that Marty Walsh was talking to Joe Biden and they were going to come in and ask Congress to make the agreement, to make the contract. I said, this isn't going to go well for the railroad workers, because whatever they try to get passed in the Senate that's actually going to benefit the workers in reference to benefits is probably not going to pass, either because of Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, or whatever reason. It's not going to pass because it doesn't support corporate interest. And so for a lot of us that are watching, and a lot of us came from the Bernie Sanders movement, but we have been very disappointed politically. And we start to see this more as like a top-down thing. Like it's the people at the top with the money versus the rest of us for the most part. And we really, like, I think, wanted you guys to go on strike because we wanted you to basically push back against the politics and say, no, you guys have to give us this. We demand it. And I said to myself, well, if the railroad workers go on strike, then maybe the truckers could go on strike with them and support them in solidarity. And then maybe the port workers can join along with the truckers and support them in solidarity. And 1, 2, 3, boom, that's your general strike. And when I talk about a general strike, I'm looking at it from an economic standpoint, that would be the push for the United States government to not just give you guys paid sick leave, but to guarantee paid sick leave to everybody in this country. But I'm curious, like, why didn't they decide to go on strike? Feel free to jump in.
Well, we did decide to go on strike. That's what I'm telling you. We did vote. Every single railroad worker organized by these 12 unions voted that we would bargain together and that no one would accept these in reality, as we coalition bargained, would accept an agreement. So by our majority, the three biggest unions are the conductors union, followed by the locomotive engineers union, followed by these are who they represent generally, followed by the maintenance of way, the track workers. 2 out of 3 of those biggest unions voted against this contract. That is why so the unions represent the 55,000 rail work, or 55% of all rail workers are weighted a little bit because of the membership size of these groups. I'm not saying this well, Matt. Help me out in a minute. So that's number one. When the law was passed in Congress, when Biden intervened and the law was passed by both parties, both houses in Congress, they basically made it illegal for us to then strike under this Railway Labor Act you're talking about. So it's a threat. It's a violent threat against us and our livelihoods were we to take that action. Not dissimilar to Ronald Reagan and the air traffic controllers. The difference being the strength of one or the other. A national group of railroad unionists is much stronger than and much larger in scope than the air traffic controllers ever were. And there are other issues. Mm-hmm. But that's so it's not a simple question. I want to point out we have a very hard and strong and long history of railroad unionists in this country acting in strike actions, as well as coal miners, steelworkers, and others. But the fact that we're not on strike right now, I think, tells me more than anything that the hard work that has to be done among working people of all livelihoods, of all stripes, these struggles we have to be involved. We have to network with them to come to the point where we have some clear understanding. I also think we got to take a step back. A year ago today, if you heard about a railroad worker, wouldn't you? I would think most people would think, oh yeah, that's the one I wave to when they go by. But the issues would not have been any clear at all. So it's a very short time that we've been actually conducting a good fight. And when I think we and other sectors of not just unions, but other social movements begin to act, things can get quicker. I think we can't. I'm with Matt all the way, and I love the way he put it. I wish we were further ahead. I wish that we could move quicker, but we can't determine any pace. We just have to recognize the pace that exists and what's possible to do. But I am so thankful for you allowing us to participate in this, because one of the issues, as I'm sure you know, is the big business media will interview you for an hour and they'll use 25 seconds of the most innocuous things you could say. So our issues don't get out there hard, but they are better now than than I've seen before, ever. That people would be saying, what, you don't have sick leave? Mm-hmm. It's a much better position. And I think that people like you that enable us to get these stories out are just such a blessing. Just such a blessing. And I wanted to thank you for providing us this opportunity.
Thank you so much. And so that people understand, like now, legally, you guys cannot go on strike through the union. Is there a possibility of a wildcat strike, or is that a no as well?
Well, wildcat means wildcat. That presumably means how would you know that ahead of time if it's something that's not like what we do through the structures that we have? I can't make any predictions. I mean, we continue through with this struggle, and I don't know how all the parts will interact. I think that workers are justifiably very concerned about the legal risk they could be placing themselves, their families, and their coworkers in were they to take any action proscribed by the legal intervention of Biden and Congress enforcing this contract on us.
I think it's important. I think it's important to note, Sabrina, just like you said, that this is where we're at. You know, once Congress stepped in and imposed this under the Railway Labor Act, a strike would be illegal. And that certainly could not be sanctioned by the unions, because if it was, then the railroads in turn could and would sue the unions for damages that they incurred as a result of the illegal strike and bankrupt them, and there would be no more unions. That's exactly what the railroads would like. This is the concern going forward in terms of strike. Are we going to see the railroad workers now striking with their feet by leaving? That remains to be seen. But you mentioned solidarity too, and I think that's very important. We've heard a lot from a lot of different labor organizations, other unions and such, that they have our backs on this. And what we're going to find out over the next 2 years is, do they really? What are people willing to do to help us hold this administration and this Congress accountable for their bad choice in this situation? What's going to happen? Is rail labor just going to get kicked in the corner now and become a victim for the greater good? This has been going on for, the better part of 40 years anyway. And again, it's why the workforce is fed up. We're fed up with this. We're fed up with having the same result all the time. We want to see something different. And it makes it very difficult when we can look at all these other unions and see the victories that they're achieving, and then we see how this end up. There's no victory for us in this. So again, it's just, it raises the general disgust. And I think as time goes on, everybody from the carriers themselves to the politicians that were involved in this are going to see the damage that's been done for this or by this. And I want to say something else to you too, because you brought up the Secretary of Labor. And I want to tell you something very alarming about Mr. Walsh too. Back in, the State Federation, Nevada AFL-CIO has formed a Transportation Trades Committee to mirror the Transportation Trades Division at the national level. And at our September meeting, that same day of that meeting, union leaders in Las Vegas were having a meeting with the secretary. And a leader from the IBEW asked me specifically in that meeting if there was anything that I would like brought up with the secretary, because being in Northern Nevada, I was not able to be at that meeting. And so I gave him some things to say or to ask. And at our November meeting, he followed up with me and told me that he went to the secretary and asked him about these things and said, what's being put forth right now is that we've averted a rail strike, and we really haven't, because this still has to be ratified by the members. And the secretary's response to this gentleman, within earshot of a number of other labor leaders in that meeting, was, well, this is the best these railroad workers are going to get. If they don't accept it, then Congress is going to step in and impose it. And that was not the answer that these people were looking for, but it was the answer that was given. So with that, it should be no surprise that's what Secretary Walsh ended up doing, is asking Congress to intervene. And that certainly was of zero help to us whatsoever. So again, what are we going to do going forward to hold these people accountable? That's the question.
Well said. Absolutely. Yes. Marty Walsh was my former mayor here in Boston, and he touted himself as a big pro-union guy. And so to see him step in and do this, I was just like, you're not pro-union. Like, this is ridiculous. I personally don't think it is right for the government to step in and to tell employees, particularly any union, that they cannot go on strike. I think it's ridiculous. But something that could be done is that even now, Joe Biden, by executive order, can still make sure that you have those sick days. And so I did see there are a couple of protests that have been happening in support of the railroad workers. And for those of you guys listening, if you see those in your area, you got to support them. Like, we really need to put that pressure on Joe Biden. Congress is a lost cause. I'd say at this point, we've tried to reach out to them multiple times. They won't come, with the exception of Ro Khanna, they will not come on to independent media. So it's just, it's really frustrating. But I did want you guys to know, like, we do stand with you. We stand with the workers, and we totally get it. And I wish you guys like the best of luck, because I do think it's another 2 years when this comes up for negotiation again. Okay. Yeah. So everybody remember that another 2 years, this comes up for negotiation again. And so, but before you go, I do want to ask both of you, what else can we be doing to help you, to help the railroad workers?
Well, I think one thing that can be done is to, where is to come to our website and check out who we are, railroadworkersunited.org. We have current news every week. We have hardworking people that put out labor news. It's available every week. It's like having a library. You can find different things in it. So I just want to encourage everyone to come to the website, donate if you can. We are always facing expenses, and join any activity, as you already said, Sabrina. Join these activities, support them, join them, bring your own sign, be a part of it. As this will continue to be in the news or not. We need to make sure that our issues, however, get before our people. And by our people, I'm talking people who live and work in this country. Those are the people who are our most important friends and allies that we can fight together with. So talk it up in your churches. Explain what these issues are. Be willing to stand up and tell the government that I can live. I can get presents for my kids some other way. I don't need to destroy other lives to do that. The big boogeyman lies that they kept raising. Get involved in your, whether it's your PTA, your school, whatever, and become a part of the living, continuous conversation that we need to have if we're going to be able to move ourselves forward and our allies across the board forward. So thank you for that, Sabrina.
Thank you both. Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
The key, I think, is solidarity. Come out and support us. And already we've seen some of that with some rallies that have taken place and everything. And that's what we need, is just people to stand behind us. This fight with the rail carriers is bigger than we in the industry could take on. We need a bigger force. And the more that we've had the opportunity to come on shows like this and educate the public about what our issues are, the more we've seen the public get behind us. And that's what we need. Make this a priority. And when you talk to your elected leadership, ask them what's going on with the rail industry and why are they not doing more to support the workers, and just put the pressure on them to do more for us. The Railway Labor Act's got to be amended to give us more power. Otherwise, we're never going to get anywhere with this. It's going to be the same game all the time. And again, we're seeing now, we live in a different country than we did 3-4 years ago. Societal attitudes have had a major shift, and the railroad's attitude is, well, we've been doing this way for 155 years. Why should we change? You're not going to get people to work in this environment anymore. And the more you put them behind the 8 ball, as they've done with this round of bargaining and the way it's ended up, the harder time you're going to have hiring and retaining people. And this is a skilled trade. This is not something that you can just hire somebody off the street and in a week or two put them out there doing this. It takes a long time to learn how to handle this equipment and not get yourself killed, how to do your jobs in any craft on the railroad. So the loss of workers that could potentially come about as a result, if we continue down this path, particularly not just in this, what's happened here this year, it's going to have long-term effects on the viability of the nation's freight rail system. So this is very important. Just get behind us and focus on how we can hold these people accountable and change their attitudes and change the outcome down the line, because there's a risk here for not just the workers in the rail industry, but the entire country as well, that relies on this freight rail system that's falling apart.
That's right. That's right. Thank you both so much for coming on. Guys, again, please be sure to visit their website. Corey put the link there in the chat, but I want to go ahead and bring it up here as well. Railroadworkersunited.org. Please go ahead and visit that website. You can also donate there as well. Matt and Mary Lee, thank you so much for coming on. And I wish you guys the best. You have my email address, so if anything else comes up, if there's any other updates, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Sabrina.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us on, Sabrina.
Bye. All right, guys. Hopefully that was educational for you. I'm so glad I got a chance to talk to them. Definitely make sure you visit that website, guys, when you get a chance. I've already looked at it, so I know what's on there. But there definitely is an option where you can donate and you can help them out. It's interesting. Like, we have to hear these stories, you guys. We have to hear them. So make sure you share that information with people as well. It's a damn shame. 2022, and we still can't guarantee sick leave for people in this country. It's ridiculous. I'm going to go to some of these comments here, and then we will go on to the next story. Thank you for the super chat, Roger Meadows. Have you considered a bill to cooperatize? Thank you so much for that, Roger. Thank you for the super chat, Lorez. This is insane. Even if not at all, y'all should strike. Devotion Orange, these asks are so basic, like it should be a given, the minimum. Lawrence says the cost pales in comparison to the truckloads of cash being diverted to the war in Ukraine. McGruff, greed is killing us all. Agreed, McGruff. Jessica, December 14th through December 15th is the yearly railway conference in Delaware. Rally anyone? That's a good thing to bring up, Jessica, for those of you who are in that area or the Delaware area. I know some of you guys watching are in like that Maryland, DC like area there. And thank you for the super chat, Lisa. If many are going to quit, why not still strike? Yeah. So they did answer that. Like, there's the legalities about it. And thank you for the super chat, Susan. With the rail workers like truckers, let us know how we can help. We are and willing and able, in total disagreement with Biden, a big phony liar, unite. And thank you for this super chat, Lorez. Oops, I meant inhumane, as railroad exec CEOs get big money. Thank you guys so much for that. We're going to go into our next story here. And speaking of money, something is happening. Something has happened here in the Boston area. They believe they have found a way to fix the poverty situation. Now, this is in reference to a pilot program that they tried out in Chelsea. Now, before I get into the article, I do want you to know where Chelsea is located. So some of you might be like, what is a Chelsea? So in the Boston area, here you have Boston. Here's Boston. Whoopity-doo. Here's Cambridge here. And then you have Bunker Hill, Monument. This is where we're starting to get into, move over here a little bit. That's Charlestown area. The line for Boston is really weird. It looks like a cutout sometimes. Like, it looks like it shouldn't be divided that way. But over here, just across the way from the Bunker Hill Monument, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. There is a place called Chelsea. Now, Chelsea is also very close to Logan Airport, which is in East Boston. So if you've ever come through Logan, you were near Chelsea, believe it or not. So Chelsea area here, the majority of the residents in Chelsea tend to be immigrants. There's a lower income in Chelsea as well. It's usually lower income immigrants. There is this portion here called Admiral's Hill where you do have a lot of people that work with the Coast Guard that stay there. And there's like that apartment complex is pretty fancy and everything, but that's usually the Coast Guard employees that stay there. But Chelsea is it's lower income. There is not a subway stop in Chelsea. They mainly have the buses, so you can take the buses. But as you know, as you move further away, which this really isn't that far, there are going to be less opportunities for you. So lower income area. Now, Boston did something. They did something here that I want to point out. This pilot program, and they believe that this is actually going to be the way to help them fix poverty. So let's dive into it. Some Chelsea residents got $400 a month with no strings attached. Here's what happened next. The city plans to launch a new version of the program in 2023 after Harvard research and a documentary highlighted its effectiveness. It's interesting that they had to have Harvard do research to tell you that this was going to be effective. Obviously, all they had to do was just ask the people. You give the people more money. It's going to help them. So I did tell you that Chelsea has a large immigrant population. Most of them are from South America, typically. So let's go in here. So Chelsea Eats was crafted out of chaos, but the lessons from the city's COVID era effort to give needy families $400 a month, no strings attached, are proving to be a boon for Harvard University researchers seeking to explore guaranteed income as a solution to poverty. Now, this is similar to UBI, but walk with me here. 5 months into the pandemic in the summer of 2020, Chelsea city manager Tom Ambrosino floated the concept of handing out debit cards to residents. At the time, Chelsea had the highest pandemic infection in Massachusetts, and lines at food pantries were stretching around the block. Now, again, this goes back to the fact what we talked about before with the pandemic is that lower income communities and also communities where people of color were hit the hardest by the pandemic. So this was no surprise in reference to Chelsea as well. Because a sizable number of Chelsea's 39,000 residents are undocumented and unable to receive other forms of federal assistance, city resources were being drained to pack, transport, and distribute 40,000 pounds of food a week. At some point, we all sort of came to a conclusion that there has to be a better way. And it goes on to say here, Ambrosino was familiar with guaranteed income programs, an increasingly popular idea in economic circles to provide direct cash assistance to people experiencing poverty. It was also aware that such a concept may get blowback from city leaders concerned about possible abuse. So he played down the big picture theorizing. We didn't promote it as universal basic income. Guys, this is the key here. They did not promote it as universal basic income. We promoted it as a solution to the problem. Is this something that could help other cities? If we were to change the framing, if we were to change the language a little bit, instead of saying universal basic income, what if we just said, this is how we're going to fix this problem, and we didn't call it a UBI? Could that help change people's minds who might be against UBI? So here you have people ending up voting to approve something that they said they were once against, all because the language has changed. Let's go on. But the result was an experiment staggering in its scope. In just 3 weeks, Ambrosino cobbled together $4 million between city funds, federal relief, and a grant from the Shaw Family Foundation, and launched Chelsea Eats, which provided debit cards to over 2,000 households. Roughly 1/6 of Chelsea's population. An additional $2 million was raised to extend the program by 3 months. From November 2020 to August 2021, each recipient got up to $400 a month. At the time, it was the largest guaranteed income program in the country. And Jeffrey Liebman at Harvard University's Rappaport Institute for Greater Boston jumped at the chance to track how it actually worked. In the weeks before the cards were handed out, Harvard researchers began texting surveys to participants entered into Chelsea Eats lottery. From the start, Liebman says he was floored by how deep the economic need was in the city. See, this is what happens when a lot of times people who are making the decisions and people who have the money don't really understand the economic needs of people who are living in poverty in the metropolitan area, because they don't usually venture into that realm. They don't usually go into those communities. So if you're not in those communities, you're not really seeing it. You're not really experiencing it. But the cost of food has heavily increased. That includes food at the grocery stores. I'm not talking about takeout. Still increasing here. So it's interesting to me, like he was very shocked. He's shocked. He's surprised. Oh my God, the level of economic need. And it's not just Chelsea. It's different parts of Boston as well. It's places like Mattapan. It's Roxbury. It's Jamaica Plain. It's a lot of the neighborhoods that, to be honest with you, you would never see coming here as a tourist. Because the trolley buses and the duck tours don't take you into those neighborhoods. They keep you into Boston proper. Kind of sad in a way because there's a lot of historic sites that you could see in those neighborhoods as well. Let's go on. 54% of kids were not getting enough food to eat. It's heartbreaking. I've never seen a number like that in the US. Again, he's never seen it. See what I mean? Because he wasn't, and this goes back to something else I've mentioned before. A lot of kids, well, not a lot of kids, take that back. Some of the kids that go to public schools that have free breakfast and free lunch, for some of those children, that's the only time they get to eat that day. That's how bad food insecurity is in this country. But you won't see that if you don't step outside of your circles. Because the funds were distributed on debit cards, researchers could track exactly how they were spent. When Liebman called data for the first 5 months of the program, he found that the funds were being spent overwhelmingly on food. Well, of course, people need to eat. 3/4 of it spent at grocery stores, restaurants, wholesale clubs, markets, and convenience stores. 1/3 of all the money spent at grocery stores went to a single market basket in Chelsea. I've been to that market basket. Market Basket is a grocery chain here, guys, for those of you who don't know. A second round of research released this week went further, comparing people who received the cards with those who did not. Liebman found that Chelsea Eats recipients spent more money overall on food and bought more fresh vegetables, meat, and fish. They described greater food satisfaction and said they felt less financial distress. They worked about the same number of hours at jobs, and they were less likely to move from their homes, which could demonstrate that the extra income provided them a bit more stability. I want to say something here about the type of food that they were able to purchase when they received these debit cards. Vegetables, meat, and fish. These are items that usually cost more at the grocery store. Typically, people, if you're working class or if you're poor, you're going to the grocery store, even if you have food stamps, you're going to buy the cheaper food items. The cheaper food items are typically those that are not good for you. Just keeping it real. A lot of times, the cheaper food items are the packaged items. So you do this test next time you go to the grocery store, all right? I told someone else to do this before too. Next time you go to the grocery store, try to do this test. Don't go down the aisles. Now, some of you are like, what? Huh? What are you talking about? Don't go down the aisles. Don't go down the aisles. Only shop around the perimeter of the grocery store. You know what you'll purchase? Vegetables, fruit, fresh meat. Some of the dairy might be on the side, depending on what store you go into. Some of them have the milk around the perimeter as well. Seafood, salmon, those types of items. Once you start going down the aisles, that's when you get all the bad shit. Like, I'm just going to be honest with you. That's when you run into the Hot Pockets. That's when you run into Doritos, Cheez-Its, packaged foods, which are not healthy, which are not as good for you. Try it one day. Try it and see how much it costs you, because meat is expensive. Some of these vegetables are expensive. Seafood is very expensive, but it's pretty cheap to buy a box of Hot Pockets. See what I mean? So it goes on to say here, the data Liebman said suggested helping needy people with direct cash can have multiple benefits, from helping them eat better to having them feel more connected to their community. Being able to buy what they want, to actually go out and buy some beef or pork to put in your stew versus only having beans. That is a big difference. And then there's one little piece here that I want to bring I want to mention there's the market basket. Sorry. I want to mention at the end. Okay. Sorry. I just want to make sure I get to that last piece. Oh, here we go. This piece right here. Where did it go? Okay. He's willing to try it again on a smaller scale. On Tuesday, Ambrosino announced that a second round of Chelsea Eats would launch in coming weeks. The shorter term program, which will run January through March of 2023, will help up to 650 families and will be covered through over 800,000 in ARPA funds. Ambrosino said that the program was the direct result of asking the community how they wanted to spend the federal funds. These things can be done. I think sometimes when you show people how people are living, doesn't work all the time, but when you show people how people are living and they see the inequity, especially when it comes to food insecurity, because they're right. People get tired of eating beans every day, damn it. They're cheap, but you get tired of eating that every day. And you show people what can be done, this can spread like wildfire. We can start seeing that something like this happen in other communities. What's sad, particularly troubling, is the fact that it took a pandemic for them to wake up to this and realize that something needed to change. That's the frustrating part, I think. I'll take those comments on Rockfin Corey. Thank you. All right. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Dave. UK workers been doing pretty well. US workers bending over for fascists too much. And thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Michael. I'm going to go to some of the comments here, and then we are going to get into the story I think a lot of you have been waiting for. Jilly Love says 400 is not enough to live on. No, it's not. That's a good point too, but I believe it's 400 on top of what they were already making. But yeah, you're right. It should be more. Imagine what $1,000 a month would do. E. Heller, people in poor working class will spend that money right back into the economy. Sylvia, I became almost vegetarian since I became disabled, and I'm on SSDI, Medicare, and food stamps. Wow, Sylvia. Wow. Okay, let's get into this story here. This debate that happened between Brianna Joy Gray, Kshama Sawant, and Ryan Grimm. Now, again, it just so happened that this debate happened right before the railroad workers came on. They were already scheduled to appear tonight. What I want you to do is I want you to think about what you just heard from the railroad workers. Take that in, channel it, let it marinate. And then I want you to keep that in mind when you listen to this debate. Now, there's certain parts here that I do want to comment on. I do think Ryan really got it handed to him. I just got to tell you. But there's certain parts here that I do want to comment on. There was one particular theme that I noticed that Ryan Grimm not once addressed throughout this debate. And I'm going to talk about that tonight. But again, here we are with the question, the railroad workers, how they were treated by politicians. Where was the squad on this issue? Did they vote correctly? What else could they have done? Let's go ahead and get into it.
Kshama and I are of the mind that what happened with the squad and the vote for the tentative agreement amounts to a betrayal. I seen you take a different position on Twitter, at least, saying that there basically was a strategic choice that was backed by at least some members of some unions, perhaps union leadership, who knows, that actually wanted the squad to go ahead and take this vote to have a shot at the sick leave bill passing. I am of the mind and have always been of the mind, and we were talking about this kind of offline while all of these votes were being counted, that there was a 0% chance that this was going to happen. It seemed like you were somewhat more credulous. Tell me why you don't see this as these votes as a betrayal by progressives of their fundamental duty not to vote for a strike-breaking bill.
And so more is coming out about how this kind of strategy came together. And there's actually a bonus episode that I was listening to earlier today of Chapo Trap House, where Will interviews Jonah Furman and two railroad workers. And one of the railroad workers turned out to be one of the workers that I'd been talking to throughout this.
Right?
I've talked to him in the past, but I was talking about Devin Mance, who was the other guest on the show. Devin Mance is he talked about, so he's with the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way employees, which is the BMWED, which is one of the ones that rejected the contract. And one of the reasons that rejected the contract is because
I wanted to pause there for a second because he's explaining to you that one of the gentlemen that he listened to is with one of the unions that rejected the contract. So just keep that in mind. Remember what the railroad workers just told you when they were on here. Take that in mind when you're listening to this debate. Let's go on.
There's an organized, and I just reached out for the actual name of it. It's called the BMWED Rank and File United. It's a caucus which is not part of leadership, that is organized within the BMWED to push the union to be more militant. And because of that organizing, that's a significant reason. I would say it's the reason why they were able to reject that contract, because they only rejected it with like a 51% vote. So, with a 51% win, everybody gets credit. So they have like 1.3 thousand members or something like that they've organized over the last year or so to try to push the union to be stronger, to push their union leadership to be stronger. So they rejected it. They then, this is what came out on Chapo, Jonah connected that rank and file caucus with Jamal Bowman's office. It was like, look, if
the caucus was connected to Jamal Bowman, who is one of the most ineffective members of Congress. I've brought this up before. He is the weakest link when you talk about members of the squad. Somewhere along the way, someone thought it was a good idea to let him lead this. Just keep that in mind.
The leadership's not going to fight for us if we're just going down. Let's go down swinging. Let's push for seven sick days on the floor. And once that started getting momentum, then you started seeing the kind of the Twitter accounts of the unions themselves saying that they also support this, because obviously union leadership, if the choice is between 0 sick days or 7 sick days, they're going to say we want the 7 sick days. So publicly it's just an interesting moment, because by fighting, they kind of forced then everybody else to come with them, because they didn't want to be embarrassed and not be part of the fight. So it actually was rank and file organized workers who pushed this strategy. So to then turn around and say, how dare you should be kicked out of the DSA for listening to the rank and file united. Like, what do we want? So these workers organized themselves inside their union to push their union to be more militant. Their union.
He's bringing up the DSA issue, and I'm going to show you some receipts on that, because let him finish because he's bringing up that the squad members should be kicked out of DSA. He's trying to criticize that. I was one of the people that said that, by the way. I said that on Rising, that they should be kicked out. But it's not just about this issue, and I'm going to get into that in just a second. But watch how he frames this argument, because he's going to say something else in a second that just doesn't fit. Watch this.
Leadership goes with a Biden strategy, which completely fails. So the workers at the last minute try to salvage something out of it, and they go to their allies in DSA, actually, because there's DSA members in Bowman's office. So that's how they get connected to Bowman's office. And then Bowman's like, yeah, all right, let's go for it. Let's fight. Let's not go down like the union leadership did. And instead of being like, Biden sucks, how could Biden have done this? Like, Biden had all the cards to play. And instead of doing that, instead of playing those cards, he sold the workers out. Instead of that, it's like kick Jamal Bowman out of the DSA. It's like,
pause. This is the piece I want to address here. So Ryan Grimm, He starts talking about DSA. He's upset because some people are saying like they should be kicked out of DSA. And he's saying that why aren't more people pointing their fingers at Joe Biden? Well, we've actually done both. I criticized Joe Biden's involvement on this just a couple days ago on my show. I criticized Joe Biden's take on this the very first time I started talking about the fact that the railroad workers could possibly go on strike. So this is not the first time. I don't know who Ryan's been watching, but we have criticized Joe Biden's take on this as well. That being said, here's where he messed up. How you go from DSA and kicking out Jamal Bowman or squad members, and then you bring up Joe Biden and mention basically like, why aren't people attacking Joe Biden? Instead, people are saying kick squad members out of DSA. Joe Biden is not a DSA member. Sorry, but he's not. Joe Biden is not a member of DSA. I don't expect Joe Biden to not be a strike breaker. And I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that. We'll come back to this clip because I brought receipts tonight. What is DSA's platform? There's 3 parts here I'm going to point out to tell you why they need to be kicked out of DSA. When we're looking at DSA's platform, let's look at the labor movement piece. Let's go down because I want to show you what they say here. The socialist movement and labor movement will rise or fall together. Our demands. Here's their demands. We're about to lay this shit out. So hold on. They list a bunch of them, but there's one in particular that I want to highlight. The legal right to a union for all, but even that's not it. The right to strike for all workers. It doesn't say the right to strike for all workers except for those that work for the railroad company. It does not say that. All workers. That's a DSA platform. The issue that we have is the fact that you have squad members who are members of DSA who voted to prevent the railroad workers from going on strike. That's a DSA policy. So yes, Ryan Grimm, yes, they should be kicked out of DSA. Joe Biden is not a DSA member. Thank you. It's not just that reason. It's not just that particular reason. There's another reason why they should be pushed out of DSA. We need to talk about abolition of the carceral state. This is also DSA platform. Let's go down. First one, we are committed to the horizon of abolition and the path leading us there. Our demands. Number 1, defund the police. By rejecting any expansion to police budgets or scope of enforcement while cutting budgets annually towards 0. Squad voted to fund the police. Squad don't even talk about defunding the police anymore. There was one member left that was still willing to do so, and that was Cori Bush, and she don't even talk about it anymore because she's been told to be silent. Because Nancy Pelosi said a month ago, that is not the direction the Democratic Party is moving in, and you don't hear any of them mention it anymore. That's reason number 2 why they should be removed from DSA. Ryan, I don't think know their policies. I don't think Ryan knows this. Let's go on. Reason number 3, international solidarity, anti-imperialism, and anti-militarism. Oh, we're going into this one. Again, here's a huge one. Let's highlight this one. Stand in solidarity with the Palestinian struggle against apartheid, colonialism, and military occupation, and for equality, human rights, and self-determination, including boycott, divestment, and sanctions, the BDS movement. This is movement number 3. Only one member I know of is back in the Palestinian struggle, and that's Rashida Tlaib. The rest of them sold out. The rest of them voting for the Iron Dome. Isn't that one of the reasons why they were trying to get Jamal Bowman out? So Ryan, it is not just about them being strike breakers. It's about other policies that they have chose to fold on that are a part of that DSA platform. Here's another one just for shits and giggles. Build an anti-war movement that opposes U.S. intervention, including sanctions. I told you I was coming with receipts. So why are they still a part of this organization at this point? They're not doing any of those things. They're definitely sure as hell not standing with the Palestinian people, with the exception of Rashida Tlaib. So yes, they should be removed from the organization. And somebody remind Ryan Grimm that Joe Biden is not a DSA member.
What? Okay, which is fine. I have no opinion on whether or not you should start a third party, whether or not Bowman should be kicked out of the DSA.
Okay,
I just feel like
about something so important.
Because it's not okay. My own opinion, yes, that's silly. That's my own opinion, but it's not my role to have an opinion on. Is what I mean. Yeah.
So Ryan thinks it's silly to remove politicians from an organization that has these principles that they are not following and they're not upholding. I think it's silly to keep them in that organization if they're not upholding those principles. But that's Ryan Grimm. That's Ryan Grimm running cover for the progressives once again.
But that's very dishonest because you have no shortage of opinions. You are not shy of giving opinions.
Sure. Okay, I think it's silly. I will admit it. I will admit it. Yes.
You've also defended the Democrats. But when it comes to actually fighting for the interests of workers, then you say you don't have an opinion. But that's okay.
Fighting
so
for they fought. They were literally the workers. They're literally the workers.
Well, let me ask you this, Ryan. Go ahead, Kshama. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
Well, what Kshama was saying earlier was, and you said this yourself, Ryan, that there is one union, and in fact, a subset of this union that's been fighting for it to be more radical. A subset that represents, you said, about 1,200, 1,500 rail workers out of over 100,000 rail workers that exist.
I think there's like 30,000 in the BMWED.
Okay,
yeah.
That pushed for this strategy with Jamal Bowman in particular. And a point that that Kshama was making before you logged on was that there are many more rank and file that are not being represented by these decisions. Maybe they are for it, maybe they are for against it. And a point that you've made to me as we've been having some of these sideline conversations is how difficult it is to poll people in the short term as these kinds of things are happening. But what we know for a fact is that the unions as a whole, 4 out of the 12 unions representing a majority of the total number of rail workers, 55% if I'm recalling correctly, voted down the very TA that ultimately got passed. And if it is the case, which of course it is, that the sick leave was going to be coupled with the TA regardless of if the progressives voted for it, because that was the only way it could get out of the House per Pramila Jayapal's apparently genius wrangling, then what purpose does it serve strategically one way or another for squad members to be voting for that TA and sick leave package? The sick leave was getting to the Senate regardless of what squad members did, which is potentially why at least one squad member, Rashida Tlaib, did not vote for it.
Yeah, that was like a better vote for the people who are angry about the vote on the TA. So, some other squad members could have done that if they want. Obviously, Bowman couldn't because he's the one that is pushing the strategy. So these workers in this independent organized caucus plus the other unions are asking them to vote yes. Should they have voted no, yes? If they could still get everything through and do the no, yes, and still get the 7-day sick day and then do a performative show I'm against this thing, I'm against this without the sick days. Sure, if they could try to figure that out, sure.
But Ryan,
find a single worker who puts that in the top 20 priority level.
We know this already. We know. I'm sorry. Am I completely going crazy? We know that the TA and the whole point of Pramila Jayapal's wrangling was that the TA and the sick days could not leave the House independently. They were going to leave together. And they had the vote for the TA. This is the progressives' whole point, is that they had the vote for the TA anyway, so I might as well have voted for the sick days. But you can flip that. You can say they had the vote for the sick days anyway, so why would I have voted for the TA?
Exactly.
And every argument could have been made about why it's horrible for the Senate not to have been able to pass the sick days, and how progressive, at the same time that progressives actually demonstrated through their votes and their commitments and their articulated disagreements with the Biden administration strategy that Biden was throwing workers under the bus. However, by voting for Biden's strategy, it neutered their ability to do so, did it not?
I mean, Tlaib, no. So look, if they had done what you said, like vote no and then they vote yes, wouldn't their critics be saying, oh, that was just a performative no vote, and they still voted for the sick leave, which then is a fig leaf that covers this thing, that then allows it to get over the Senate, which then and then the Senate takes it out.
No,
so,
nobody's saying that about.
No, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Brianna. This is a complete straw man argument that has no basis in reality. If socialists and progressive had voted only for a bill with paid sick leave, who in their right mind, who's on the side of the railroad workers, would be blaming them for that? This is complete nonsense.
Right.
And it's really just a way to, again,
but wait a minute.
Away from.
Another thing I want to add in here too is, because I know he brings this up as well, is the fact that, well, they already had enough votes for the contract to pass, which was actually going to prevent them from being able to go on strike, right? He's like, oh, that passed with like 80 votes. They already had enough votes for that anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered if they voted against it or not. Yes, it would have, because again, I think, I'll say this a little bit later, it still would have mattered, because that would have meant that they were doing their job as progressives in the House, which is to not be a strike breaker. So yes, it would have mattered. Bernie Sanders totally understood this. Bernie Sanders did not vote in favor for them to have the contract that would prevent them from having a strike. He did not vote that way. Even Elizabeth Warren didn't vote in favor of it. So let's all remember that. But they couldn't figure this out. You mean to tell me Rashida Tlaib was the only one that had 2 cents to say, wait a minute, that is not what we're supposed to be doing. I am not going to do that. You mean to tell me they couldn't figure that out? If they already had the majority of the votes in the House and it was going to pass anyway, then why the hell would you not vote the other way? And then to have your base, have your progressive base behind you and say, see, look, the squad is doing what they're supposed to do. I don't buy it.
From the reality that nobody in their right mind, Ryan, maybe despite being a political analyst, you thought that the Senate, there was any chance of the Senate voting yes on a paid sick leave bill. But as Brianna, you were saying, workers in their right mind understood that there was zero chance of this passing in the Senate. So what they actually did is what's performative, which is where they gave cover to the Biden administration and to the Republicans to break the strike and to sell out the workers. And yes, Biden did betray, and the betrayal began with the Biden administration. There is no question about that. But it is commentators like yourself who will then, at any moment, whoever among the Democratic Party is in the crossfire of workers, justifiably, then those people are going to be protected. So when the fire was against workers, were angry against AOC and Jayapal, then suddenly AOC starts tweeting, and then you all start defending her by saying, oh well, the unions wanted it. But as I was clarifying before you came, it wasn't union rank and file, and I don't know which rank and file you spoke to, but it is just complete nonsense to say that railroad workers who are just struggling for their basic survival were somehow going to be accepting this. The reality is, again, we have to keep in mind that ultimately, when it came down to the vote, it was sort of a very hollow situation. There was no real strategy out for the workers. So we have to keep bringing it back to the more basic question about what is it really that allows workers to win some victories. It is actually by going on strike and having a fighting strategy. So none of this is going to provide a solution. And we on the left, I'm not talking about people like Ryan Grimm. I mean, those of us who genuinely want to defend working people, we have the obligation to call out both elected officials who have betrayed us and also the labor leaders who have betrayed us, and not play this game of deflection and obfuscation. When the blame is on AOC, they get to say, oh, it's the labor leaders, and when the blame is on the labor leaders, they get to say, oh, it was the Democrats or Biden. They are all together betraying working people.
That's right. And I want to bring up a point here as well. They knew this was not going to, the sick leave was not going to pass in the Senate. Let me tell you how I know that they knew, because let's do some math. Let's do some math. Now, we already know Joe Manchin was not going to be for this. We already knew that. He had already announced it before the vote happened. So why would you then think that it would pass in the Senate if Joe Manchin, number one, was already against it? Now, it turned out there were 6 Republicans that did support the 7-day sick leave, but that was performative too, because the only reason they stepped forward to vote for it is because they knew that it wasn't going to pass. They already knew the sick leave did not have the votes to pass. So this is their chance to say, let me be performative and show my constituents that I care about them having sick leave, knowing damn well if it had the votes to pass, they would not have supported it for the most part. I seriously doubt that. So I consider that to be performative as well. But I will also say this. They had to have known, the squad had to have known that the sick days were not going to pass in the Senate. They had to have known that. I knew that, and I'm not even there. So how is Ryan Grimm falling for this? How is he falling for this? He has direct contact with progressives in Congress. We don't.
Okay, well, I would say just go listen to the interview with the workers that Chapo posted. It's called BMWED, Rank and File United. Those
Ryan,
are the
one of those 2 workers was just on Bad Faith podcast last week. Ross was on Bad Faith last week. We had this conversation last Wednesday, the day all of this went down.
And he was against pushing for the 7 sick days?
We talked before the votes were actually cast. So we didn't have an explicit vote about something that I think none of us really contemplated would happen, which is progressives providing cover for. Sorry, this is the part that I feel like we're kind of talking past each other on, Ryan. The strategy itself seems like a strategy in quotation marks that you would design to provide explicit cover for a bad outcome, because there is no strategic gain from anybody who cares about the interests of labor for progressives voting for this thing. Coupling the sick leave and the sick days and the TA in the House had the effect of not actually enabling the sick days to get out of the House any more than it had the effect of enabling the TA to get out of the House. Because the business interest of America wanted the strike to be crushed, they were going to vote for the combination package, knowing that the Senate could take care of crushing the sick days.
That piece is very important. The business class, corporate interests. A lot of times legislation that passes through has some type of corporate interest. So that piece is very important. The 7-day sick leave doesn't benefit corporate interests. It benefits the workers and solely the workers. So of course they were going to vote against that and tear that down. And this is what people really need to understand here. The fact that in 2022, we can't even guarantee sick pay for people. Like this is appalling. This is appalling. You guys see why they should have forced the vote for Medicare for all? You guys see this? Now it's they only want to guarantee sick pay for people. What is next?
So the idea that to have a strategy where you have an up-down vote on the sick days required squad members to vote for the TA coming out of the House is complete malarkey. It's bullshit. Like the strategy itself makes no sense. And the only reason to have it then is to provide, the only purpose that it serves for someone like Pramila Jayapal is to provide cover for the AOCs and the Jamal Moments and the et cetera, who have to justify why they're voting for something that, as Kshama has described, is a pure labor crushing, strike crushing vote. Do you see it differently?
I mean, so if you listen to that interview, the other point that that Devin makes is that this, as far as he's aware, it's the first time that using the Railway Labor Act that a PEB, like a bargain that was kind of brokered by the president, has ever been strengthened. Like that this sets a precedent. Perhaps it's been done for airlines, but it has never happened before with rail workers. It's always been, here it is, we're shoving this down your throat, take it. So for the House to make it actually better sets a new precedent.
Precedent for what?
So they've been stalling this for they've installed that Congress can actually make a deal for workers better. So
why do you want Congress to even make the deal for workers? Why do you want the government to come in and make a deal for the workers? Like, this is the piece that's really weird to me. And he says this as though this is a positive thing. And through all of this debate, not once does he mention the core issue here, which is the fact that you have these companies exploiting these workers. The capitalist system is not working in this country. It is not working. The government should not be intervening at all to make a contract for the workers and to tell them what they can and cannot get.
there's a reason he cares about this, and he explained it. The carriers have been stalling for 3 years, as you know. You've covered this.
Yes.
And the reason that they've been stalling is because they know that they can just jam it down their throats, using the Railway Labor Act and using Congress, right? So now that has changed a little bit because now you have a situation where the House has actually made it better. So if the union, so they're 2 years away from their next contract negotiation. Those negotiations practically start now. Actually, they still have to wrap up the last one, but they're going to start negotiating their next contract very soon. Now the carriers know that there is precedent that in the House, with enough public attention, enough organizing, and enough pressure on them, the House might actually make that deal better for workers.
See, he don't even guarantee that it's going to be made better. He says might. He says it might be better. People need sick leave now, Ryan. People need sick pay today, not 2 years from now, and maybe and mights. You guys just listened to the railroad workers were just on here. You heard what Matt said. His wife got sick. She passed away. He did not get paid for that. I think Ryan should talk to other people. He needs to talk to other workers instead of coming out here running cover for the squad.
So now the carriers can't just sit there and say, no, we're not going to negotiate at all. We're not going to bargain with you at all. You're just going to take what you can get. And so 2 years from now, and that's what organizing is about. Is like
Ryan,
building.
How good might the deal have been if Congress were not empowered to crush the strike the strike power that gives labor their entire leverage? What kind of bill would we be discussing if we didn't have Congress empowered by the Railroad Labor Act to swoop in and negotiate on behalf of business?
Oh, it would probably be a lot better. But it got 80 votes in the Senate and 290 in the House. So now, we don't live in that world.
But now, Ryan,
we don't live in that world. I gotta say something here. Because he said the same thing when he was on RBN. We don't live in that world. I think this is like his phrase or something, his thing. We don't live in that world. That isn't the world that we live in. We know that though, Ryan. But the point of the progressive movement and the progressives in Congress, the point of the movement was to change the world that we do live in, was to change that world, was to reform that world. That is not happening because they are going along with corporate Democrats. Do you see what I'm saying? It was very clear to me listening to this conversation that Ryan is one of those people where it seems like he may have issues with the way that politics runs, the system is run. He may have issues with it, but he's also the type of person that will take a seat back and just say, but that's just how it is. We already have those people, Ryan. Those are most of the politicians in DC. The whole point of the progressive movement was to change that world, to make it better, to reform it. So because that has not happened, whether it's been with force the vote, whether it's been for voting for the Iron Dome, whether it has been for backing the state of Israel instead of the Palestinians like they're supposed to do, according to DSA and according to Justice Democrats, whether it's been any of these other whack-ass votes that they've had where they have not acted the way that they're supposed to, whether it's been them backing off on defunding the police. The reason why we don't have that world, Ryan, is because the people who were sent there to DC to reform it and to kind of change that world fell back and caved in. So now Ryan Grimm can continue to say this shit for the next couple of years, however long they're still in DC. We don't live in that world. We don't live in that world. Got this many votes in the House. Got that many votes in the Senate. This is just not the world we live in. The numbers are what they are. They just don't add up. Well, it was going to pass anyway. He can continue to do that because they're not doing their job. And they're not doing their job because people like him are continuing to run cover for them. That's why.
Progressives on a progressive podcast that are talking about the incremental improvement, apparently, to a deal that people have been saying firmly no to, despite any other incremental improvements that have been offered up on the table, because the fundamental crux of the disagreement, the sick days, were not in it. And this is why, Ryan, people accuse you, people have accused other reporters who have been covering this, and Jamal Bowman, AOC, Jonah Furman, others, of basically neutering the power of the moment and providing cover for the establishment. Because at the end of the day, the shift in the conversation from why on earth do we have this bill that enables Biden to crush a labor action? And why does Biden get to still call himself the best labor president since FDR while crushing labor? Instead of having that conversation, vociferously argued by the squad members in the broader left media sphere, we're having a conversation. We are celebrating what are supposed to be the left flank of our political discourse for creating a machination in the House that gave cover to progressives to allow that strike crushing to happen in the first instance.
Every time we have tried to do some type of worker-led direct action, pressure from the outside movement, or put pressure on them, Ryan Grimm has come in to run cover for them and shut the shit down. Let's go back to force the vote. He was wrong about that. He was wrong. He was right about the fact that McCarthy would not become speaker, but he was wrong to oppose it because, again, the part that Ryan is missing here, and I'm starting to think he's missing it on purpose, to be honest with you. The part that Ryan is missing here is this. You have to ask yourself, what was Justice Democrats' assignment? What was the task that they were given when they went to DC? The assignment was to disrupt the Democratic Party, to implement a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party. That was the assignment. That was the task. So when Ryan Grimm comes in and runs cover and says, well, they didn't have enough votes. Same thing with force the vote. Well, they don't have enough votes to bring Medicare for All bill to the floor, so it's not going to pass anyway. Ryan is ignoring the fact that they are not doing the assignment that they were given to do. And the assignment that they were given to do was to disrupt, was to take over the Democratic Party. He doesn't acknowledge that. He doesn't acknowledge that they were not supposed to be just like the average Democrat politician going to DC. They were supposed to be different. He doesn't acknowledge that they signed a pledge when they joined Justice Democrats, saying that they would do these things. So every time Ryan comes in and runs cover for them, It gives them more padding. They're protected more. And that actually hinders their involvement. And the more you hinder their involvement, the less they're going to feel like they actually have to do anything because of people like Ryan Grimm. It's not just him, there's others too, but because of people like Ryan Grimm. So Ryan, you can come to me with numbers. You can come to me with this many votes, that many people. You can come to me with all these different conversations that you've had with members of Congress all day long, all you want to. But if you continue to ignore the fact, the mission that they were given to do when they went into DC, I see you nothing more than someone who definitely is not an ally, but someone whose sole purpose now is to provide cover for the squad, to protect them and to shield them from any type of criticism. And the moment people criticize them on Twitter, here you come, bam. Well, actually, they did this, and this. Every time. Did it with Force the Vote. He's doing it with this here. Every time he's there to run cover. And it is a problem. And if you guys don't see this and you don't call this shit out, there is something up. There is something up. He does it more than anybody. Even Anna Kasparian was not buying this shit. Even Anna Kasparian had things to say about the way that they voted, that they were strike breakers. Ryan did not. Pay attention to that. Again, ask yourself, what was their assignment going into DC?
So, but maybe the workers don't want to be part of this fantasy play. Like the workers, like actually.
What are you talking?
So to get rid of the Railway Labor Act, good. Let's get rid of the Railway Labor Act of 1923. Like, what are you talking about? Like, there's no like who's organizing that? Coming in here after it's already been enacted,
go ahead, Kshama.
and then
I'm sorry.
It's already it's done, and then people are going to come in on Monday morning and say they're going to get rid of the Railway Labor Act.
This guy slows down any type of chance of progress that we have. There he goes talking about the Railroad Labor Act. Oh, what are we supposed to do? It's been here since the 20s. We're just supposed to get rid of it? You can't force the vote for Medicare for all. You don't have the votes on the floor. DSA handbook policy. One of the first things that they were supposed to do. Anytime. He criticized our General Strike Summit and didn't even watch it. This guy was on Twitter and he goes, oh my God, people having a General Strike Summit. Whoa, people are not ready for a general strike. A summit is education. It's education, Ryan. You can't have strikes without education. You can't have a general strike without education. The civil rights movement didn't happen without education first. But here he comes. Anytime we try to do any type of outside movement or push pressure back, Ryan Grimm jumps on Twitter. Let me see how I can put it into this shit and keep people voting for the squad and keep people back in the Democratic Party. That shit's suspect. It's sus.
Go ahead, Kshama.
I think this is just terrible. This kind of obfuscation. It's like, moving the goalpost at every moment to in order to keep from admitting to this undeniable logic that Brianna, you were talking about, that there is no universe where you can describe this as a good thing. There was nothing good to be gained out of voting for a bill without the paid sick leave, as the TA bill, as you were saying, and I see you shifting your arguments, Ryan. Every time we present an argument, you're talking about something else. When you went on the Revolutionary Blackout Network podcast, you said that you're not arguing it's a court. You said you're not arguing it's a good thing that the squad did, and yet your overwhelming emphasis is quote unquote explaining. I'm saying putting quotes because I don't think it explains it, but you're trying to explain and defend their action. When we talk about them, you say it's Biden. When you say it's Biden, it's the Railway Labor Act. So it doesn't matter what we say. You are going to your goal is to defend the status quo. And I have to say, more than anything else, it is just rotten to hide behind what some supposed worker said in some podcast, and probably very likely said it in a desperation of not having had a way out, with both their union leaders having failed to organize a strike action and build for mass solidarity nationwide, and with both the Democrats and Republicans selling them out. Yeah, so in that moment of desperation, maybe a worker said that. I don't need to watch that podcast to know which side I am on. I don't need a memo from union rank and file to know which side of a strike breaker bill to be on. Bernie Sanders didn't need a memo. He knew what was the right thing to do. I just wanted to share another example of what it takes to actually stand up for workers. When the UPS Teamsters in 2018 were facing another bad tentative agreement, at that time, the rank and file were very angry, and they had taken a strike authorization vote earlier that year. Does that mean that unanimously 100% of the members voted for strike authorization? Obviously not. So, this whole thing of, there was one worker somewhere on some podcast who said that this was okay. So what? Yes, that's true. There is no vote in the labor movement, and I don't know how much Ryan actually knows about the labor movement. I have been a rank and file member of the labor movement. I've been a delegate to the Labor Council. I have spent 10 years as an elected representative alongside rank and file labor. I know how these things happen, and there is no vote which is unanimous. You can always find one worker who is not for the strike action, who is maybe who has conservative ideas and all that stuff. But that is not the point. The point is, are you, as an elected representative who calls yourself a socialist or a progressive, do you understand what your role is? And the reason I'm mentioning the UPS contract battle in 2018 is that at that time, I've been a city council member for over 9 years. So now, in 2018, 90% of the rank and file of the UPS and Teamsters took a strike authorization vote. I wrote a public op-ed in response to that, saying that if the rank and file go on strike, I will have their back. And just for writing that op-ed, the Teamsters in the Seattle area, the Teamster leadership, let's be clear, in the Seattle area, the labor bureaucrats, they decided to punish me for that. And they refused, and in fact, the entire Labor Council leadership refused to support our re-election campaign in 2019. And we were able to win that campaign despite that and defeat the pro-corporate candidate that the labor leadership had supported, because we had the rank and file on our side. The rank and file of the Teamsters Union was donating to our campaign and was door knocking and tabling for our campaign. That is how you stand up for rank and file labor, not hiding behind maybe one conservative rank and file union member, let alone hiding behind the leadership. As a matter of fact, it is your duty to call out the labor leadership that is selling out workers. And that is why ultimately we are not going to have a solution. Again, I'm not here to have an academic debate about supposed clever stratagems among people, in Congress. I'm here to fight for workers, and I'm here to talk to the workers who are listening to this show. And ultimately, my message is to them. I don't expect to convince Ryan Grimm. My message is to workers. And as far as what is our, what is our way forward? Like, where do we go from here? We cannot have a starting point for a way forward unless we talk about the tasks ahead, not only in terms of holding elected officials accountable. And yes, that is why I do believe, as a DSA member myself, that unless the DSA leadership expels these betrayers, they are going to be, the DSA leadership has to own this betrayal. But it's not just about.
Do you see what I'm saying? That's exactly the point that I was making as well. There has to be someone has to hold them accountable here, whether it's DSA, whether it's the organization Justice Democrats. Somebody has to do it. Someone has to do it. Obviously, it don't look like it's going to be Ryan. Let me be clear. The reason why Ryan Grimm has access to them is because he's not going to heavily criticize them. If Ryan Grimm was doing the same things that we're doing, he would not have access to them. You see how it works? That's why you don't see them go on to independent media like that, because they know they're not going to go onto shows where people are going to be heavily critical of them. They're not even going onto the shows for people who are defending them. So what does that tell you? There's a reason why he has access to them per se. Now, I do want to speed ahead just a little bit here. I'm not going to be able to play the entire thingy, but there's another piece I want to get to here, I think.
Rank and file voted against that contract. So you're supposedly saying that even that does not provide any clarity the socialists and the progressives, let alone Biden, of what to do. Come on, give me a break.
No, let me be clear here. The rank and file union, the BMW, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Employees, the one that you meant, Maintenance of Way Employees, the one that you mentioned, they're one of the biggest trade unions in this group. They voted it down. A significant reason that they voted it down is that this rank and file caucus inside the union organized against it to try to push leadership to get a better deal. So they're with you. They're 100% with you on that. The same people who did that are the people who then went to Bowman's office and said, hey, can we do this? You're now saying it's one guy who's probably conservative.
No. No one's saying it's one guy who's probably conservative, Ryan. But let me ask you this. Can you justify independently on principles of labor power organization and the stated desires of the union vote as a whole who voted down this contract? Can you justify strategically why this would be something that squad members should do to vote for a TA that was going to pass anyway?
Listen to what he says.
Like, yeah, if I were like a squad advisor in their office telling them what to do, I'd say, look, Pelosi's out of here anyway. Like you've already got the agreement for the sick days. It's gonna pass with like 300 votes. Just go up there and vote no. Like it's gonna be easier for you in public if you just go there and vote no. That is what I would have advised.
But they don't need someone to even advise them to do that, because if they're following the DSA handbook, which they're members of, and if they are following the Justice Democrat principles, which I've laid out on the show multiple times, they already know what to do. They know they're not supposed to break strikes. They know they're not supposed to be going against, they're not supposed to be going against defunding the police. They know they're not supposed to back the state of Israel. They're supposed to back the Palestinian-led movement. They know all of these things, Ryan. Why do they need you or someone else to come in and advise them on what to do? This, again, we have to go back to this question here. What was their assignment going into DC? And are they fulfilling that? No, they are not. I don't have time to play the entire thingy, but there's one more piece I think we get to later on. Yeah. I think it was before right here. I think.
Crushing defeat for labor?
And
that's so destructive. That's so toxic.
You're asking me what the
a 5-year-old will understand what counts as leverage and what does not. This was a strike-breaking vote. As Brianna said, it was a soul-crushing vote. But more than that, it was worse than that, actually. That's bad enough, but it was worse than that. It didn't help, and it is one of the things that is helping create an opening for dangerous far-right ideas. It's turning people, this is the sort of betrayal that turns people, genuine, good working class people, young people away from politics. Because when you have a historic betrayal like this, then ordinary people get turned away from politics, and worse than that, they could become fodder for the right. They might think that, this disingenuous and complete con man like Trump could be on their side. That is what happened. That is how Trump won in the first.
100%. That is how we got someone like Donald Trump. And I'm hearing people saying that now. People who are workers that are just like, look, Joe Biden sold out the people, the squad selling out the workers, and you have Joe Biden selling out the workers, the squad selling out the workers, the Democratic Party selling out the workers. I noticed the Republicans seem to be more on the side of the workers. So some people are going over towards the Republican Party. This is exactly how someone like Trump could win. This is exactly how someone like, believe it or not, someone like Ron DeSantis could win. This is how we get there. We get someone in there like Obama or Joe Biden, and they pretend that they're going to do these things for working class people. They stab the working class people in the back, and then they're surprised when you get some buffoon like Donald Trump who wins. It's not rocket science. It's pretty simple. You stand with the workers. Not hard to figure out. Not hard. Now, there's one more piece here at the very beginning. And I think this was the first time I heard Kshama Sawant use profanity. But you have to see this part here. Let me pop back.
It was a
I'm sorry,
betrayal.
what the actual fuck? Are you saying that those of us who are standing up for workers, we have the responsibility? You have the responsibility.
Yes, you have to find a
But
worker,
Mariah,
one worker.
They have to justify why it is that they voted to break a strike, knowing that they literally had zero to gain from it.
The workers felt they had something to gain from it. Maybe the workers don't want to be part of this fantasy play.
Now, again, the railroad workers were on here tonight. So remember what they said and listen to what he's saying.
The workers
actually
What are you talking?
to get rid of the Railway Labor Act?
If socialists and progressive had voted only for a bill with paid sick leave, who in their right mind, who's on the side of the railroad workers, would be blaming them for this? This is complete nonsense.
The rank and file organizes inside BMWED. They push this strategy.
You cannot.
And you're like, well, there's some conservative, and you smear them as conservative. On what basis are you smearing these workers?
I do not appreciate you obscuring what I said.
I am very glad to be having.
Yeah, so I can't show the entire vid because I do have call-in tonight, so I figured you guys would want to talk about this. But the interview was called "Debate: Did the Squad Betray Rail Workers?" So definitely check it out. It's a longer interview. I think it's almost 2 hours. Yeah, it's almost 2 hours. So definitely check that out. Now I have one more thing that I do want to show you as well. One of the things that's mentioned, I didn't get to it in the interview, but one of the things that was mentioned that Ryan Grimm said, you guys should talk to them. You guys should tell them that. And Brie reminds him that we can't because we don't have access to them. Ryan Grimm does. So I was on Rising earlier this week, and I want you to hear what I said towards the end, directed towards people like Ryan Grimm, who does have access to them, that does not hold them accountable. Listen to this. That's correct. And I think we need to ask ourselves, are they effective at this point in time? Based on what I've seen, they're not effective. And I think the strategy of putting progressives into the Democratic Party, when this was introduced at the time, in theory, it sounds great. But in practice, it has not been working. The problem is now they're in places that are unreachable. We can't reach them anymore. They do not appear on independent media for the most part. So how are we supposed to even talk to them? So that's another problem. They now have this wall in front of them where we cannot reach them. So there's something else has to be done here. There are people that do have direct lines to the progressives in Congress, but most of us do not. And for those people that do, I call on to you as well. You also need to hold them accountable. And I understand that they have to be careful with their criticism because they don't want to lose access to them. But if you're constantly running cover for them, you are not helping the left movement at all.
Well, thank you, Sabrina, for joining us today.
Thank you. Yeah, that was directed towards people like Ryan Grimm, because that's exactly what he's doing. Now let's hear how some of the railroad workers feel about people standing in solidarity with them. There was a railroad worker protest at Grand Central Terminal, and I just want to play a little bit of this, the opening part of this speech here.
President acted in the interests of the railroad companies. They've been doing that since 1926 when they enforced that law, only for railway workers and airline pilots. To take away the right of our brothers and sisters to strike is a violation of their human rights. To take away their right to be sick so that they can speed up and exploit us more is a violation of our human rights. So we came tonight to make a statement. We saw our airline pilots were here in solidarity to make a statement. And so the program tonight is one of solidarity with our brothers and sisters who fight every day to transport and deliver you and goods and services across this country.
Well said. Well said. If you want to see the rest of this video here, it is called Unions Are Waking Up to Political Parties, and that is by Occupy Radio. So yeah, definitely check that out. I am going to take a quick teensy break before call in, Corey's going to come on and read some of the super chats and the comments, but we are going to talk about this tonight on call in. And I want to get your take now that you've seen the railroad workers, you've heard what they had to say, and you've seen this debate here between Brie, Ryan, and Kshama Sawant. How do you feel about things now? I definitely want to hear from you. So Corey, yeah, you can go ahead and come in whenever you're ready here.
All right. Hi. Hello, everybody. This is when we give Sabrina a little break between calling. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Corey. I am Eric's son, and I fill in for him here on Thursday. So I'm going to read some chats. All right. Thank you for the tip, Andrew Matthews, Common Ryan Grimm L, and Common Kshama Sawant W. Thank you for that. Thank you for the tip, Devotion Orange. Kshama said if DSA doesn't kick out the squad after this, then it falls on DSA heads. Thank you for that. Thank you for the super sticker, Jay the Informant. Thank you for the chat for Colin. If the squad was really badass, they would be saying why there isn't paid sick leave on the federal level. Thank you. And thank you for the chat, Cryosynth. Grimjob is a plain paid clown world. What is even the point anymore of this government and these so-called activist organizations like DSA? This was all a sham. Thanks. And thank you, KDK7. He's saying that the second vote helps rail workers in the future, while the first does irreparable damage to the union all across the U.S. workforce. All right, and on Rockfin, thank you for the tip, JVB. And thank you for the tip, Dave Burt. Look, unless we start really fighting more and more, not adhering to work and career location, unless people will take part of the rampaging fascist military and rebuild the productive economy, the work, make sensible work. And yeah, Joe Biden has always been a finance bitch and strike breaker and scam master flash. Thank you for that. Yeah, so tonight, Colin is going to be talking about the Brie, Kshama, and Ryan debate that we just saw. Personally, I thought that was really interesting. Definitely Brie and Kshama just eviscerating Ryan. So definitely there's going to be a lot of good stuff to talk about for that tonight. So definitely hope that we see you over there. Let me put the link in Colin. Or rather the link to Colin in the chat. Let's see. Beards unite. Yeah, definitely a beard guy. Thank you for that. Let's see. Someone is raising their kids right. Eric T. Red. Yeah, having Eric as a dad is pretty interesting. It's definitely a pleasure to have somebody that I'm so politically aligned with. Let's see, Gamer, I have a beard, but it's not that big. I believe in you, Gamer. They have beard growth oils. You can definitely try and see what you can do with that. Thank you, Robert. As a DSA member, I support kicking out any squad member who doesn't support the workers in the strike. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. If you're going to call yourself any kind of leftist or any kind of socialist activist, and you're doing any kind of squad breaking or crossing the line, it's obviously something that needs to be stamped out. And yeah, so again, heading over to Colin. Hope to see a good amount of you over there. It's always pretty interesting. I'm always impressed at how long Sabrina goes and has these really interesting and diverse conversations with the fans. It's something that really we get when we're in this independent media space. My thing that I really love about the Call-In is it's like the public square. So you have all of these different opinions. And it's really a place in which we can have our free speech and talk, which is something that's desperately needed now in this kind of mainstream media propagandized environment. And thank you, Jamone, Colin, and Reef were great on INN yesterday. And Sabrina's back, so I'm gonna head out and have a good night.
All right, honey buns, let's do the damn thing. We are going to head on over to Call In. So here we go. Episode 61, Brie, Kshama, and Ryan debate recap. Recently, Brianna Joy Gray, Kshama Sawant, and Ryan Grimm debated the squad's votes about the railroad worker strike. What are your thoughts about the debate? Who do you feel is correct and why? And also keep into consideration what you heard from the railroad workers who came on tonight. That is very important. That is key. The call-in link is pinned to the top of the chat. I'll see you guys over there. I'll be back tomorrow. More stories. I heard the Twitter files has dropped part 2. So we're probably going to discuss that tomorrow. Until then, guys, see you on call in. I'm heading out. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.